Hi, welcome everybody. We are going to be talking about fostering SEL in the virtual environment, and we'll be speaking specifically about kind of self-control and self-management because that is a huge component of virtual learning, and it really draws on those skills. But without further ado, we're going to dig in and just kind of get started. This is a pretty interactive session, so we'll be asking you questions as we go along. But if you have rejoined us, I know it was a very quick break, but have you ever joined us? Identify 1 to 9 on the rubber ducky scale. How are you feeling today? Are you a 1 and you fully inflated? Or are you a 5 feeling a bit stretched, etc.? Where on the rubber ducky scale are you feeling today? And while you're responding in the chat, I will pull it up. Um, this is also a real rubber duck. It's kind of an art exhibit. They made a massive inflatable rubber duck that would travel around purely for the purpose of making people happy. And unfortunately, it had an incident and it slowly deflated and was no more. But there were a couple of these like global, if you can tell by the scale of the people in this picture, I mean, we're talking a massive rubber duck. But I think it's kind of funny and cute. So we've got some fours, so you're feeling slightly deflated, but not fully deflated. I understand. I might be somewhere in this 7 range because my kid is sick and I'm starting to get sick. And so I will say that I'm feeling a little under the water, but still still here, still trying. Um, yep, we got a 9. Yes. I hope your day turns around. I understand. You may feel like you've completely sunk, taking a full dip in the water. But hopefully your day will turn around a little bit. So this is kind of just a light way. So we're going to be talking a lot of different components of SEL. But one of them is just to check in with your students sometimes when you're going on. I like to check in with the people that I'm interacting with virtually or face to face, but it also doesn't hurt to check in with your students and see how they're feeling on a given day because someone may be at a 9. And so maybe I don't necessarily push the person or the student who would be at a 9 that day because they have already they're already feeling a little deflated. Maybe I need to help fill them back up, fill up their cup. So hopefully we will fill up your cup and you'll feel less like you're drowning by the end of the session. Our focus today is really kind of building connections and also really understanding SEL and fostering that self-regulation, which will lead itself into fostering a community. And once everyone is able to kind of engage in their agency, regulate themselves, it will build a stronger community over time. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is foundational SEL. I will do a check-in to see where you are at in the SEL framework and what you know about it so that I can adjust what I want to dig into during this session. The second thing that we're going to talk about is really fostering that self-regulation. Again, virtual learning really requires students to manage themselves to some degree. So we're going to be talking about how we can help students with that. And then we will be talking about tools to help in the end. So first thing we're going to talk about, foundational SEL. Let's make sure that we know the Castle framework. So before I dig into this, if you can give me a quick indicator in the chat to your comfort and awareness level of the Castle framework. 1 being I have never heard of this before, and 3 being like know it, use it, could teach it to somebody else. And 2 is somewhere in that middle range. But 1, have no idea. I need you to tell me a little bit more. 3, I got this. I could teach this section. Okay, mostly 2s. So I'll kind of go in the mid range. Minus funny. So I will assume that you have at least seen this framework before and are somewhere in the SEL journey. So the Castle framework is widely accepted as the kind of SEL framework to use. It involves 5 different competencies from self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision making. And of course, they are impacted by your beautiful blue circles, which are the context. So SEL is going to look a little bit different depending on your classroom, your curriculum, your practices and policies, and your family and community partnerships are going to impact the way that you handle and address SEL in your schools. That is a quick introduction to the SEL. And again, I think this red area is what we're going to be focusing mostly today, but these 5 different areas really help students navigate and make decisions, navigate their relationships, navigate themselves to help them be successful, not just in school, but in life. These are competencies we use far beyond just the classroom, but we can help grow them intentionally within the classroom space. So, which of the 5 competencies do you feel is your strongest, just out of curiosity, when you are teaching? And this is like, we talk about social awareness all the time. We talk about responsible decision making. That's my strong point. What do you feel is your strongest competency? And as we go through today, there'll be opportunities for you to also share your strategies, relationship skills. I know that as a high school English teacher, we used to unpack the relationships and the different novels and books that we'd read, just to help students talk about it, look at it in the context of their lives. And as we dig in, again, we're going to be focusing mostly in that self awareness and self management space, but I feel like they are foundational to social awareness, to relationship skills, and to responsible decision making. I'm not going to be able to build meaningful relationships if I cannot manage myself, if I do not understand my emotions and I'm able to understand them and look at them and make decisions off of them, that I'm not going to be as socially aware of others, build those relationship skills, or make responsible decision making. So I think it really starts at that one red area and they kind of grow from red to green to yellow. But I also want to touch base because Maslow's hierarchy of needs is also an area that we need to be considering when it comes to SEL, because a lot of the times we throw in these SEL components, but we talk about these skills and we talk about the competencies and things and these skills that students need to learn, but there's a whole other component of SEL that sometimes we don't talk about as much, which is our basic needs, right? Our safety needs, our esteem needs. We, of course, want students to get to self actualization. But I want to also tie in that we talk about these skills and competencies, but there's also a component of needs. Pulling from this very popular, of course, you've probably seen the hierarchy of needs before. But I wanted to ask you, what level of the hierarchy of needs do you feel like you spend the most time in? And where do you wish you were spending the most time in? So the first question is, what level do you feel like you're working with students at? That students, like, I'm trying to help them feel like they belong versus like, of course, I would like self-exam. And it is particularly hard in the virtual environment. I mean, the basic needs in a physical school, we can at least provide food, right? We can provide a safety and security of our physical building. We can have blankets in our classrooms, right? It is those basic needs we are really dependent upon happening at home, right? Or wherever they are calling in from. So those basic needs, it's not an area that we can control or even really impact. We can have small impact in it when they're in a physical building. But if those basic needs are not met, that can definitely impact our ability and our students' ability to get to those self-fulfillment needs. Um, but where we were going to live is like, of course, we would always want to get to that highest level, but things that we can control in our virtual environment are those esteem needs, the belonging, and that's some of the things that we're going to talk about, because they're all we talk about sometimes with the castle framework is these skills and competencies. But what it is feeding is our esteem needs, is the student's sense of belonging and love needs. So they tie very nicely together. And sometimes I like to consider both, is it's not just these competencies and skills, but there is also needs that are being fulfilled for students in order for them to get to those self-fulfilling needs at the top. Because social and emotional needs and skills, looking at both those frameworks, are foundational to academic success. If we don't get the social and emotional components in, they're not going to be able to focus as much in our classrooms, or they're going to be distracted because they're hungry, or they're going to, if they have trouble focusing, in their self management, they might not do what they need to do in order to be successful. So the question is, how do we build these skills at a distance? And how can we support all of our students in the process? Because every kid's going to come to us with a different level of SEL skills and competencies. Because virtual learning really requires significant self regulation. It requires us to be able to sit in one spot without others, to limit distractions because we're in control of our own environment, right? Kind of when we're joining virtually. The TV might be on, my game system might be in the corner. Like there are a lot of self control and self management things that are happening. Am I controlling and managing what I'm supposed to be doing? So let's really dig into fostering that self regulation. Oh, wonderful. I'm glad that's what you were talking about. So we'll dig into that. So, in order to break down that self regulation piece, we're going to talk about three different areas in which they are self regulating: the forethought phase, things that we're planning, performance phase when they're doing the tasks, and the reflection phase. And we're going to break those down and talk about strategies. So, the forethought stage, setting those goals, utilizing organizer, recognizing task values, checking prior knowledge. What tools and resources are you using in order to engage students and help them with their setting the goals? Are there things that you're doing? And we'll talk about some additional strategies as we go on. So, in the chat, what are you doing in order to help students manage setting goals, utilizing organizers, recognizing task values? And we'll be sharing some tools a little later too. Like, for example, in an earlier session, um, Amy was kind of utilizing Minty, kind of checking prior knowledge. When I did the one, two, threes, checking prior knowledge, right? There are all sorts of little minor things that we can do to check those prior knowledges virtually. Some of them are things that worked really well with us in the physical classroom that we can kind of take and package, like Minty, use that in a regular classroom as well. And there's other things that we can do special to our virtual setting. So is there anyone who sets goals with students? Helps rank them in the organizers. The other thing you can do is in utilizing organizers. I was one of those students who really needed to like color code to keep organized. And one thing I would help and spend time with my students doing is helping, if it worked for them, to color code their planners that have a different color for their different subject areas. Um, Doing numbering, like what is that recognizing task values, like what do I really need to get done immediately? This is something that is due tomorrow and I need to do it, versus something that I have a little bit more time or it's not as essential as my other tasks. So you can have them number and prioritize the tasks that are on their plate. Sometimes that helps students, especially if they get overwhelmed with a large task list or a significant project, helping them break it down. There's a tool I'm going to show you a little later that helps break down large projects into simpler tasks, which will help them manage their time. Because managing your time and recognizing, especially if they've been on a computer all day for virtual learning in our classrooms, to then do homework and revisit and come back to their computers, making sure that they can prioritize this is what I really need to do. This is the time, and I'm going to manage myself and manage my time to get it done. The next phase is the performance phase, helping them stay focused, applying motivational strategies. Like some kids will be like, I can recognize that I need to work for shorter periods of time. I'm not going to be able to do this for a long time, but I'm going to set my timer for 20 minutes. I'm going to study for these 20 minutes, and then I'm going to give myself a piece of chocolate or whatever. I'm going to reward myself with that strategy. So, even talking, I think it's important to talk about some strategies with kids, because a lot of times they just don't realize that, oh, I hadn't thought about, okay, this is even Jackie on the slide deck. I don't know if you saw the 10-minute timer. There's all these awesome timers that are available on YouTube. And some of them, I like the one that is a dial. So, if you do believe it's called a dial. I will confirm that in a moment. YouTube video, it'll be a circle and it won't give you the impact of numbers, but they're like a circle, and the circle slowly gets smaller and smaller and smaller until the time is up. And so that's useful in my class when I'm trying to, if they're doing something and I want them to come back together and that's the time that they have to work on it, having something visual so we're all not just sitting together can help students focus, be like, oh no, that is the time that I have left. But they can also, I can send them some timers, be like, set your timer for your homework and give yourself a break. Let's talk about managing ourselves. Let's talk about these skills that are really essential to the virtual environment. A lot of times we just don't talk about managing themselves and what we can do to help them manage themselves. So, helping them apply and know about motivational strategies, challenging to give them to try something and see if it works for them, uh, can help just set the stage. Sometimes we just don't think about it when we don't talk about it. And sometimes just talking about it and giving students ideas on how they can motivate themselves. Can be helpful, or to set up, like, if you're in your room and sometimes, like, some people can't focus when their place is a mess, so find a clean space 5 minutes before, whether it's, I mean, even there are times when, like, I join in a technically art closet, but it is cleaner than some of the other spaces because I have small children. And so sometimes I'm like, this is nice and clean because they're not able to come in here. So even telling students, be like, find a space that is clean and clear for them might be something that they need that will help them focus versus sitting, in their room, you know, with everything a mess around them, or dogs coming in and out, siblings, etc. So just talking about, since those basic needs are more in their control. Are you grabbing a snack before class starts? Are you sitting in a space that you feel like you can focus? And being a little bit flexible about what they need and what they can control in that space. And also just letting them turn on virtual backgrounds. Some people, I mean, I don't know what your rules are, but I remember during the pandemic, that was the huge conversation is, well, they need to have their background, but that's also a safety and security issue if there's some kids do not feel comfortable, or it's a bullying issue. Some people do not feel comfortable showing their entire background of their house or where they are, but allowing some virtual backgrounds can maybe make them feel more comfortable coming off a video if they know that their peers are not going to see the space that they're in. Um, Next up, so self-monitoring learning progress, turning learning over to students, and this also drives learner agency. So the more they're empowered and more they are able to control and monitor themselves, and look at where they are in learning and their next steps, takes a weight off of you too. So in teaching and taking the time to help teach students self-management and self-regulation, it lends itself to learner agency, which is empowers them and allows them to do more of that self-monitoring of learning progress, or letting them self-assess themselves on a project and to give themselves feedback versus it strictly coming from you. Because then sometimes they're even harsher than you would be. And then that allows you to be the good guy versus saying, they're letting them self-assess. How did you do? How do you think you did on this paper? Where are areas that you feel like were weak, or this project, etc.? And the last component of the performance phase is, does a kid feel confident and comfortable seeking help? Can they identify, I don't know what to do, but I can seek help? And that is a part of self-management, is to identify and recognize, I don't get it. Can I reach out to someone? Do I know how to reach out to someone? And talking about ways and encouraging and creating space for students to seek help, whether it's if you provide more casual ways for them to reach out to you, because some kids are not comfortable here, not comfortable seeking help. And the last phase is the reflection phase, engaging in critical self reflection. Do they know and can evaluate where they are in learning, where they are in their lesson? Do they understand what they're supposed to be learning and what they have learned? And can they identify next steps? And again, this leans more toward once they can understand where they are, they can have agency in moving the next step. So we kind of talked that a little bit. You can add on the chat, what strategies do you use to foster self regulation? And honestly, I think a huge component of it is just talking about and having a conversation with kids about what is self-regulation, what are things that are in your control, what are strategies you can try. 'Cause again, I think it's a conversation that we might have one-offs, but actually just using the words and teaching them what it is and talking about it, and giving them strategies to try out, because a important point of SEL, I feel, is that it's not that we are telling them how to manage themselves or how to manage their relationships or what decisions to make, but giving them the strategies and giving them the awareness to make those decisions for themselves, to engage in those relationships, to think more thoughtfully about what they're doing with themselves, what they're doing with others, and what decisions they're making is really what SEL is all about, is that we're equipping them. We're not telling them what to do, but we're equipping them with the ability to make the decisions themselves and engage in their own agency and learning. So, because fostering self regulation, again, is a foundation, it is a foundation to learner agency and their ability to lead their own learning. It is foundational to their relationship skills, their decision making, especially when it comes to ethical decision making, if they have an issue that comes up or if they have um, something that's going to impact somebody else. And it also lends itself to community building, because once everybody is regulating themselves a little bit better, we're able to engage with each other more thoughtfully, and engage in the learning community more thoughtfully. So here's a couple tools. These are a couple resources that will help you kind of engage. And I'm going to talk through what these different tools are and give you a little bit of time to play with them. Some of these you may have seen before, and you may not have considered it in the way that we're using it, but I'm going to talk about why these help self regulation, and in the way that you can use them to teach self regulation to kids. Trello, I've used myself in order to organize projects. It can be very handy to, it's kind of like a Padlet board, but it's individual and it's project based. So I can add my links to all my different things. I can project plan, I can build a task list, I can do a bunch of different things and organize it by board. So even if I have a big project that they're working on and they can share the board with me and collaborate with it, with other students as well, I can be like, part one, getting organized. What question, if it's a PBL, what question are we asking? What is our topic? Some of the general, like, this is my parameters given to me by my teacher. And the next can be work through the phases of the project. And you can work with them. You can provide, there's tons of templates on Trello and tons of examples of different project boards. So you can give it to them as examples too, but it helps them get organized, because organization is one of those kind of SEL competencies too. Is, am I able, or those learning differences? Some people are better organizers than others. Some really need help, and giving them the tools that help set them up for success instead of just starting and just not having anything to go off of can be helpful sometimes. Canva is really nice for a graphic organizer. So it is kind of like an organization tool. So if I'm working on a project, it's kind of a different way of doing Trello. Trello is very box oriented, but I've been using Canva is also another tool that some people use for organizing their task lists, organizing projects or building projects. So it allows students to kind of control and work together. Another thing that we talked about back in Ed Camp, which I know was a different thing, was getting students to collaborate. And I feel like Canva also allows you to collaborate. And it also has some really cool AI things, which is not what we're talking about today, but you should check those out. Um, JaboMind is really more for teachers, but I do think it has some really interesting practices that you can use to translate for students. It is intended specifically for teachers and kind of walks you through breathing exercises and, um, talks about some very specific issues that come up in the classroom or how to handle, when students are not doing what you expect them to do. The Jambu 9 is intended and built specifically for teachers, but I do think some of the mindfulness activities is something that you can translate. And mindfulness really just helps us to slow down and exist in the moment. A lot of times with anxiety for or other mental health issues is all about worrying about the future, worrying about the past, not living in the present. And mindfulness is about existing in the present, which is that self management. Can I set aside that I'm mad at my friend for what they did this weekend and focus on what I'm doing right now, um, and slow down and focus on what I'm doing? So that's kind of a focus tool. There's other mindfulness. There wasn't anything free for students. There's Calm, there's Headspace, some other things, but I thought that was interesting that it was a space for teachers. Wakelet allows you to create and organize resources. So if there's like, this is my school website, they could even have a Wakelet for all of the school pieces. So they have one place that they know that they can go to that all of their school resources are, or all of their classroom resources. They can organize it around their homework. Wakelet just helps you because just helps you stay in control of everything that is happening. Toby allows you to collect. I use this all the time. It's a Chrome extension that allows you to collect all of your open tabs for a project and organize them. And then you can reopen them. So if you're working on something, you can put all of your tabs and it will save it for you. Collect all of the open tabs that you have. And maybe that's something like I use it regularly for my own self. You can organize all of the tabs and then reopen them so that you don't have 1,000. If you're one of those people who have like 100 tabs open, perhaps this could help you collect and organize them so that you can close a tab without feeling like you lost it. It will always be there. And then Flip allows just kind of an alternative way for students to um, kind of discuss and engage with each other. Some students do not feel comfortable or they feel very anxious about talking on camera or talking in a Zoom because there is some sort of strange formality with online virtual learning that doesn't really exist in the classroom. Um, but Flip, you know, you can, even if they don't want to be on video at all, they can make a puppet or they can turn off their camera, or they can act out different things or write out. Sometimes it will help them feel less anxious if they could write out what they're saying versus trying to do it live in a class. So Flip is just kind of another way to have discussions, but engage. So we can take a moment. I'm going to check my time. So we'll take like 5 minutes if you want to take a moment to explore some of these, and I'll be here to answer questions. Or if there's something that you have, a strategy that you use to help students get organized, help manage their time, manage their space. Again, there's so many things. That first layer is not in our control at all. Where they're joining from, the space that they're sitting in, whether they've had a snack or water with them, those sorts of things. But um, talking and making sure those needs are being met to help them regulate, if that's what they need. If you need to have a drink with you, they are in their own, helping, like, okay, and go do that thing that you need that was going to help you focus. If there's other tools that you use to help regulate or help students regulate, please feel free to share. If you want to explore these for a couple minutes, or if you have other tools, we would love to hear from you too. Or if you have questions related to anything that I've talked about, you're welcome to add as well.
So when I was in class, I used another teacher referred. It's called The First Five by Doug Overton. It's an email you get every day, and it has like elementary school and high school. And my attendance question is I get from that all the time, whether it's one of the questions or one of the little check-ins with the different charts, or it has mindfulness tips, how you can be like, it just has all kinds of things. And then there's a new one every day. So as a teacher, you may not have a lot of time to like dig through those resources and find them. And that email every day helps me find something to share with my students, and it might be about organization or just mindfulness or taking care of themselves. It's a really good resource. So,
Like that. I think sometimes just having a good reminder, or sometimes they or we don't even know what is out there, or sometimes we just need the ideas or need the reminder. There's all sorts of different radial timers. I know that's not what we're here for, but honestly, if especially as students are working in independently or in small groups and you have a certain time, but you like there can be some value in the pressure of a time, a number ticking down. But if you're not going for the pressure, radial timers can be a little bit calmer, and you can do it for 10 minutes, but also you can have could also help students, like again, setting a timer for themselves. If they are really, and when you talk to them, if they're talking about struggling with getting started, or focusing, or they're overwhelmed by whatever they're supposed to be doing, just like set a timer and just do it for 10 minutes. Do the thing 5 minutes even, and to uh, dial it down to what do they need to, oops, sorry, what they need to focus on, will really help them just kind of dig in. So I wanted to take a moment to talk about how might you use these tools or other tools that you're using to foster that self-regulation. And this will be kind of the closing conversation. I'm going to share real quick. You can either hop on the mic. Here's one just, it might be something that emails you great strategies or ideas, or things that you do to help students regulate or manage themselves when they're joining you virtually. We've only covered a small, little list of things that we can do to help students to self management. Again, I've mentioned this a couple times. I think just holding the conversation, um, or surveying them. What are strategies that they've tried, that they can even share with others, to kind of empower them a little bit. But one of the, oh, yep. Do you mind? Yes. Wonderful. Because that is, I mean, like part of, I think SEL is important for students, but it's also important for us as adults. And mindfulness can be very helpful for us to unpack the very hectic, demanding school day, and to, like you said, let go of the day. As you go home and you try to revitalize, maybe that will help you, um, shed some of that weight, because teaching is hard work and heavy work. It is not for the faint of heart. So, quick review of everything that we've covered today. Again, value social emotional needs in tandem with academics, because if we don't get to their social emotional needs, we don't help them build their capacities, they're not going to be as successful in academics. They're foundational. The more I'm able to manage myself, the more I am able to, manage my relationships and make responsible decisions, which are usually also tied to doing the homework without I'm assigned, making, am I going to go to the mall, or am I going to do this thing that I need to do for my school? That is a responsible decision. That is very hard. But do they make the right choice? Do they look at not just what they want right now, but the thing, what's going to help them in their long term? That is all a component of SEL. Also, identifying that self learning environments require a high level of self regulation, I think far more so than in person, because in person, they are at least assigned a seat in my space, in a space that I control. So I take some of that self regulation off the plate. But when they're learning virtually and they are in a different space, a space I cannot control, it requires them to take part in a different way. And the last one is fostering self-regulation empowers, that learner agency and equips them for success. So as we are better able to regulate ourselves, it allows them to turn that power of the classroom over to the students so that they can take a larger role in their education, and not just kind of letting it happen to them. So thank you for taking part in our session today.